Hello again, friends. My name is Morgan from RacerX Performance Tuning. Today we're going to be installing the AEM Flex Fuel Sensor on the Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4. Then we're going to go into the AEM Series 2, make the necessary configurations in the ECU to run flex fuel in the car. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the pros and cons of E85, what other options you have available to you, as well as considerations for if you need to do this, and if so, when. We got a lot to do. Let's get started. Installation is a fairly straightforward process. You're going to want to identify your return line for your fuel. All right, so that's going to be the one that's going to be coming after your fuel pressure regulator, heading back toward the fuel tank and the pump. So once you've identified that line, you're going to basically just cut that line, relieve the fuel pressure first so that you don't have anything squirting on you, but you're going to cut that line. Then you're just going to put the flex fuel sensor right in line with that line. So just put it in there so the flow is going to come into the sensor and out of the sensor back to your fuel pump. It doesn't matter which direction you put the sensor in because it's going to pick it up either way. Once that's done, then all you really need to do from there, you've got three connections that's going to connect to the harness here. One's going to be to ground, one is going to be to a 12-volt switched power, and the other one's going to go back to your ECU to provide the signal for AEM to pick up and determine what to do with your flex fuel amount. Okay, so we start off by removing our return fuel line from our fuel pressure regulator. That'll give us access to the line and allow us to work with it. Once you've loosened the clamp, you'll have to just kind of work it back and forth on each side, possibly with a screwdriver, so you can get it all the way off of there. After you've got your return fuel line removed, give yourself enough access. You can then cut a spot, maybe about 6-7 inches down, which will allow you to insert the flex fuel sensor right there. Once your fuel line is cut, you begin the process of putting in your barb fittings, one into each end. Stick them all the way in there and secure them with a clamp. Once you got your barb fittings inserted into your return lines, tighten them up with a clamp to make sure they don't come off, and then we'll be ready to insert the flex fuel sensor. Next, you insert the flex fuel sensor into your end fittings. Make sure that the fittings snap all the way until you hear a click. At this point, it's probably a good idea to go ahead inside the car, start up the engine, and check for any leaks. Next, we want to carefully take our pins and our crimping tool and crimp our pins to our wires. Once that's done, we'll be able to insert the wires into the sensor harness. Ensure we push them all the way through until they click on the other side, and be ready to insert the harness into the sensor itself. Okay, so inside the vehicle, down in the driver's side compartment area, and if you're like me, you know, every time I close this panel here and I put that Phillips head screw back in there, you know, I cross myself, I say a little prayer, you know, before all those skeletons in the closet behind here, and I think this is the last time I'm ever going in here. But no, we're back in here again. So we got to get into the nest, and we're going to make some modifications in there. Really just got to hook in one wire into our ECU, so it should be pretty painless, and hopefully don't mess anything else up while we're doing it. Alright, so having opened up Pandora's box, we actually are not in too bad a shape. What we want to do is we just want to get to pin number 45 if you're in the second gen, and I think it's pin 115 if you're on a first gen. So that's actually going to be on the second harness connection from the top there. Already kind of pulled it out here a little bit, and I'm going to notice that it already has a wiring into it. I think it's for magnetic clutch, which AEM doesn't use. So basically we're going to be able to cut this wire actually closer, give us a little access, and then we'll be able to splice our signal wire from the sensor into there, plug everything back in to the ECU, and we'll see what we got. Very well. Now that we have our sensor has been installed and we've made the necessary changes down at the ECU to get everything pinned in and wired up correctly. And we're ready to turn our attention to our AEM Series 2 software and to begin to make the necessary calibration changes to take advantage of our flex fuel sensor. The first thing you're going to want to do is to go in and you need to open up the workspace for the flex fuel sensor, for the flex fuel tuning. So you'll find it here listed as Series 2 Flex Fuel Workspace. You may want to make a copy. It's kind of my habit to make a copy so I can keep the original one around in case I make some changes as I'm usually going to do. But so we'll open up this one and we won't save anything. We'll go ahead and open a calibration we can work with. So the first thing you're going to see that's different with the flex fuel workspace is that you're going to get 5 new tabs, all associated with flex fuel. So you're going to have, in addition to your start tab, you'll have a flex start tab. Your fuel tab will also have a flex fuel tab. O2 feedback tab will have an O2 flex O2 feedback tab to go with it. You got an ignition tab and now as well a flex ignition tab to go inside with that. And then finally, under your boost, you've got advanced boost, and then to go along with that, you'll have a flex advanced boost tab. All right, so those are the tabs that we'll begin with. So where do we start? We're definitely going to start on the flex fuel tab. Let's talk about what we see in here and what we need to work with. So on the left hand side, you get some additional channels that you wouldn't have had before. All of these be noted with the word flex in front of them. So I have a flex O2 target, flex fuel frequency. These are the ones we're going to focus on right now, and flex fuel content. Okay? So we'll talk about what those are about and what that means here. But it's part of what we're going to do, get things set up to use the flex fuel sensor. So down here under options, you're going to notice a couple things now that you have. You've got a flex fuel input option, and then there's another one called flex fuel switch input. And let's talk about the differences between these two right now. The flex fuel input is the one you're most likely going to use. You're going to use a flex fuel input, and you'll get a number of options here. Let's open this up. You get everything from switch 2 down through switch 6. T1, T2, T3, and T4, and then additional ones for vehicle speed and engine speed. All of these are going to correspond to what you have chosen at the ECU to wire in the signal wire from your flex fuel sensor. So just referring to our ECU pinout, that would be, so here in our example, we wired things up to switch 2, which on the 94 through 97 second gens was pin 45, and on the first gens it's pin 115. And so that's kind of telling us we are on switch 2. That's our input that we're using. You might have used something else. You could use switch 6 or one of the other options available to you that will show up here. So that's essentially how we're identifying which input we're going to be using to work with on the AEM Series 2 software. So once you've identified which input option you have that you're working with, and as we said before, we were working with switch 2, the next thing you're going to need to do, and on my setup you have to hit enter after selecting this, is you have to identify and turn on one or both of the rising edge and the falling edge for the switch or otherwise whatever input you're using. So by default, let's say if we're using switch 2, you happen to notice that there happen to be here already a switch 2 rising edge and switch 2 falling edge. Now, depending on, various people have had different results with this. If you speak with, let's say, Jeff Evans, he's going to say you're going to need to turn on both of these in order to get things to work right. And I'll explain what that means in a moment. Others, like maybe Faskings, he'll note that maybe you just need one or the other. You may need to play with these to get everything to work right, but these are the options that you have here that you're going to need to either have one or both of these edges on that correspond to your input. Now, if you're falling and rising edge isn't listed here, obviously you just need to go over here, hit the plus sign, and then go and find it. So let's say maybe we were working with switch 6 or switch 5. One of the other ones is not here. You can see they're listed there, switch 2, 3, 4, 5, and just add them in. So let's say we got 5 rising and 5 falling. If that's what we were going to be working with, then we need those two. And we would have to turn them on if we were using switch number 5. What else do we need here? Let's talk about this next one here, which is this this other option just below here for a flex fuel switch input, and what the difference is between these two. If you use the first one, flex fuel input, it's basically saying, hey, I'm going to be using that flex fuel sensor that you wired in here and evaluating how much ethanol is in the fuel content, and then we're going to do some work between the maps based on that. If, however, you're not using a sensor, you can actually still use this area of AEM and just say, I'm going to use this switch, which is going to say, when I turn this all to always on, it's going to say that what's happening now is we're going to be using just the flex fuel maps. We're not going to use the standard maps. We're not going to do any interpolation or any averaging between. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But that is one way in which, let's say you don't have a sensor, you're not going to be doing any interpolation between two, and you're going to be just running exclusively one of your two types of fuel. So you're either going to be running your 10% ethanol or your 0% ethanol, or you're going to be running your 85, 75, 98, whatever it may be. And all you're saying is the AEM is just, this is a way to switch between two maps if you've got those programmed and you just want to go with those two. So that's one option. We're going to turn it off since that's not what we're doing here. And so again, with the first one, it's going to then use the sensor, and we'll do some averaging and some interpolation between the maps we have for flex and non-flex settings based on that. Okay, let's go back up to the channels, and a couple things we're going to note here that you're going to look for. I mentioned two areas before. Your flex fuel frequency. Before you get things set up down here with the options, if you have everything wired in and you've got the key on, what you're going to see in this area is about 65,000 whatever hertz. And obviously that's an astronomical number. You know that things are not right when you're seeing that, or just things are not yet hooked up. What this will look like when you do have everything hooked up is that the hertz range should run between 50 and 150. So 50 will mean you've got 0 ethanol content, 150 means you've got 100% ethanol content. So anywhere in between, we're now using the flex fuel areas and interpolating and averaging between the maps. So you'll be able to look at that frequency and see that that's, let's say if it's reading 60 hertz, then you know that you're running E10, or essentially pump 93 or pump octane ethanol levels. Also, correspondingly, what you're really going to be looking at more likely is the flex fuel content percentage. And this is going to read, as we mentioned, if you're running pump 93, it's going to read 10%. If you're running E85 and it's a summer blend, then you should see something closer to 85%. If it's a winter blend, you might be 70, you might be 50, but this is the value that we're really looking for here to work with. Okay, so continuing on, we're still on the flex fuel tab, and here's the part where we're going to start to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going to happen here. So you've got one table here, 2D or 3D table called flex fuel blend. And on the bottom is on the x-axis is the flex fuel content, and the y-axis is the flex fuel blend percentage. What you want to do here is something like this. So if you've got, let's say the maximum you're going to be running in your car is going to be let's say E85, and it's going to be evaluated at 85% ethanol within there. So what you can do is take everything from E85, from 85% on up, and just use your S button and set all of these to 100. What that's going to do for us is say that when we're at 85% ethanol or higher, we're going to be using 100% of our flex tabs, all of the calibration settings that we have, whether it be for fuel, ignition, O2, but we're going to be using that entirely. Down at the low end, at the 10% range, and below, we'll leave all that alone, because this was saying, okay, if we've got pump 93 E10, well, we don't want to use any of the flex fuel tables, right? Because we're not running anything related to flex fuel, so it's all going to be our original tables, and we'll leave that alone. The question is, and the area we want to work with is, what's going to happen when we've got some mix or something less than our E85 but more than our E10? And this is where your flex fuel sensor is going to give you that value in terms of that percentage, and you can use this now. We're going to go highlight all the values down to E10, and we'll just do a little horizontal interpolation, and as that, like that. Oh, it looks like I left off something at the end here. Let's make this up to 100. Let's just set the last one at 100, so our table is correct. So from here, from E10 all the way up to E85, there will be a gradual increase as we move more toward the flex fuel tables and less from the original ethanol 10 tables. And then anything that's below E10, we're just going to stay. If it's E5 or there's no ethanol at all, then of course we still won't be using the flex fuel tables, and we'll just stay like that. So this setting right here is the important part. And almost all the other tables, the flex tables, are going to use this. Now, if you have E98 available to you, then you want to go over here and start at E95 or 98, and then set all of those to 100, and then do your horizontal interpolation between 10 and your highest level of ethanol that you're going to run. Having set up our flex fuel blend, so the next thing we're going to do on this tab is we're going to go ahead and make the changes to the actual fuel table for the flex fuel settings. So this again is your your 85% or your higher, whatever it is, your maximum level of ethanol content. This is going to be a fuel table you're going to set up to manage that. So how do you do it? Well, for this video, we're going to assume that you've completed your tune under pump 93, right? So you got your fuel table all set up the way you want it to be, and now you're going to be making the move to E85 and starting to use that. So what you can do is you can take all of the values. Let's do a Control A here. We'll take all of the values that we've got in our original fuel map. Oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I just wanted to copy that. Take all the values that we've got there, go over to your Flex Fuel tab, just flip over to the Flex Fuel tab, and we can go ahead and Control A and Control V, paste all of them in there. Now, that's going to basically say your Flex Fuel table right now is matching your fuel table, but since you're running E85, you're going to need to run at least 30%, maybe 35% higher or more fuel than you would on your pump a gasoline because of the requirements necessary for E85. So you can just go in here, once you've copied everything, make your percentage change. We're just going to say for the moment we'll do 30%, and boom, just like that, our fuel map is now matching our original fuel map in terms of its structure, but now we've got the 30% more that we need to run the E85. This gets you most of the way there in terms of your fueling. This is not a copy paste and I'm done situation though. You're still going to need to go and do your runs. Do your same fuel tuning that you would do before. Do your idle tuning, do your cruise tuning, and then get into your wide open throttle tuning. All right, this is going to get you a good idea of where you should be. The fuel map that you set up prior in your original tune should still be accurate, but you may find you may need to add or remove a little bit of fuel to get to your O2 targets or to manage things in terms of where you want to be when you're in boost. So this is a starting point. Still got to do your tuning, but it's going to get you to a good space to start with. Okay, and now the last thing we want to look at on the Flex Fuel tab is a couple more options, and these are for safety things. So two things that Jeff Evans emphasizes is your Flex Freeze TPS and your Flex Fuel failsafe. So we're going to talk about both of those. One is here, and you might have to add the other one. So let's go in and we see our Flex Fuel failsafe is here. We don't have the Flex Freeze TPS, so let's go in here, type FL to get us into Flex, and there it is, Flex Fuel TPS. So we can add this in here. All right, so these are two safety features. Let's talk about each one of them and how you might want to set them up. Flex Fuel failsafe. So for this one here, what happens is if there's any time that you're running your car and for some reason, you lose the signal from your flex fuel sensor, right? Who knows what happened? Some wire got detached or otherwise. To protect your engine, saying here, okay, well, what do I want to default to, right? What's the AFR? I'm sorry, what's the flex fuel range I want to run? Well, you have a couple of choices here, right? If you're running your 85, which is basically saying, you know what, I'm going to assume, not knowing what the answer is here, what's going on, I'm going to assume I'm running E85, which will be a richer fuel map, right? We just talked about that. So your worry is less, right? Let's say for some reason you're not running 85, but you can run rich and you'll be okay. The flip side is, you had this value too low, and you're not running E85, and your engine doesn't know what it's doing at this point. It's flipping between maps. This is just to protect your engine by running the richest map setting that you're going to have. Right. The other one, this Flex Fuels TPS. So this is your throttle position sensor, and this has a lot to do with what's going on in your engine, especially in your fuel delivery system when you're basically when you're on the go, right? Some of the things that can happen is maybe the amount of fuel that's going through your return line, it could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more, but it probably could be a little bit less than normal, okay, when you're under full throttle. And so there's a chance that the ethanol content value coming back from the sensor could be incorrect, right? So what we're saying here is, you know what? Once I've got my throttle above X percentage, right, 60% in this case, I'm going to say, well, freeze it right there. Don't change anything. Understand that I'm running at this rate. So if anything unforeseen happens, it's going to assume that I'm still running at this level. Okay? So these are two of your safety features that are on the Flex Fuel tab, and you're going to want to use those. Now, moving over to our Flex Fuel Start tab, what we're going to do is essentially we take everything that's in your original Start tab, copy all those values over. So take your initial crank pulse, your crank injector time, warm up enrichment, warm up flex. Well, we'll get to that. Start extra decay, and your start extra temp. Start extra versus temp. Copy all those values over to your Flex Start tab. The additional table that you'll see here is your Flex Fuel blend. Remember, we set this up previously on the Flex Fuel tab, and it's going to be showing up evident in all the other tabs. It's going to be the same values as we set up there. This will be one exception, and that'll be in the Flex Ignition tab, and we'll get there momentarily. There's really only one thing you're going to want to change here, and that's going to be in your initial crank flex pulse. Now, why we want to do this is one of the natures of the physics of E85, and is that it has a harder time starting up in the cold, right? So if you're running E10, what have you, you're going to be okay starting up your engine cold. And you hear everybody who complains from an E85 perspective is that they have a hard time starting up their car in the winter. There's a few things you can do with that, and AEM gives you opportunities to manage some things in your startup tables. What we're going to want to do here, though, is we're going to actually increase the initial crank flex pulse. Right? So when we're in these cold temperatures, especially below freezing, this is Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't think anybody's going to start up their car down here, but if you did, you're going to want to add a lot more fuel. So basically what's going to happen here, I'm going to do a copy paste from another table I have to kind of show you how this should be characterized. It's going to kind of look like this. Your table may vary a little bit, but essentially we're saying, hey, in these colder temps, we're going to add more fuel during our initial crank pulse so we can get things going and get the engine going. Once we've warmed up, again, essentially, by the time we get to 140 degrees, engine's definitely warm at that point, and we'll be at the exact same, level of fuel that we're putting through in the flex pulse as we were doing in our normal pulse, 140 and above. So if the temperature's good, we're going to be doing the same thing. If the temperature's cold, we're going to add more fuel. But that is really essentially the main change you're going to make in your flex start table. Depending on where you live, what temperatures you experience, you may not need to do anything here at all. But it won't hurt you either. This startup is going to be very brief. All right, now the next tab we're going to look at is our Flex O2 tab. Okay, so this is your O2 targets that you would have in your original table. And what I would do is I would, just regardless of whatever AEM may start you off with, I would copy paste all of these values from here and bring them over to your Flex 02 table. Do a Control All and paste them all in there. These values were the same. You're going to notice again that Flex Fuel Blend table is here. Again, it's going to just come over from our Flex Fuel table, and will remain the same in this table as well as the startup table. So what's the main thing you're going to deal with here, all right, on your Flex 02 table is typically, if you did a Pump 93, a Pump 91 tune, you may be running O2 targets down into the low 10s here in your high boost areas, right? This might be typical just to add enough fuel in there to try to ward off detonation. But now you're running essentially a race fuel at well over 103, 104, 109 octane, depending on your level of ethanol. So you don't need to run this rich here. What you can do is, like I said, we took our whole table. We're going to copy everything and take everything in the boost area, right? And you may just simply do like I might do and just add one here. So it's going to bring me from 10s to 11s, right? Which is a great area to be running in. Then let's just do a little horizontal interpolation between that first row in the boost area and the first row below the zero level. So we'll just do a little H here. That'll blend that thing in nicely for you. So your map has consistency, a gradual increase, and now you're running into the low 11s as part of your flex fuel map. Right? This is what I do in terms of changing between a Pump 93 map, a Pump 91 map, and a race fuel, essentially a race fuel level map. This is the one change you make that I recommend if you're going to do it from Flex 02. And again, we talked about earlier on the fuel tab, same thing here. You're going to still do your fuel tuning to make sure that these values are appropriate, and just go through the process. Now, moving on, we'll go over to our Flex Ignition tab. Okay, so we've got a timing tab, and then we've got a Flex timing tab. So again, what we're going to do here is we're similar to what we did in the fuel areas. Is we're going to, basically take all the values that we originally had in our tune that we created, our calibration that we created for our pump gas or our E10. Copy all those values, and then bring them over to our Flex tab. Again, Control All and Control V will paste them all in there. Now again, these values are already copied in. So what you're going to be able to do is a couple things with this. One, if you're running, this higher level octane of fuel, much like if you're running a race fuel, you have an ability right away to safely add at least 3, maybe 5, maybe 7 degrees of timing almost across the board. Your minimum, your MBT is going to be quite a bit higher than it was before under the pump gas. We were definitely knock limited pretty quickly. So you can basically go in here, again, highlight all of the cells, hit E, and let's say, whoops, I didn't mean to hit E. Let's hit A instead, and we can add. For safety's sake, I'm just going to go and add 5 degrees right now. Okay, and that's going to just up the table. It's going to stay in the same, calibration shape that you created. You haven't changed anything here, except that you've increased your timing by about 5 degrees. As I said before, with fuel, it's going to be the same thing with timing. You're still going to want to make your runs. You're still going to want to check, against your knock. You're going to see how things are going. You're going to check your torque and keep working to increase, until you reach that minimum brake torque, both from a boosted perspective as well. Get yourself some steady state tuning and do this area of your map as well to round out all of your tuning. Right. This is going to get you, again, it's going to get you about halfway there, maybe much more than halfway there, because you've already done the hard work already in your 93 tune to get the shape of your ignition table. So you can use that to your advantage and then finish the job up with a good starting point. Well, now, I want to refer over here in the left-hand corner. We've got a Flex Blend ignition table again. This time you're going to notice it's not been set. It did not take the defaults from what we did in our flex fuel. You may choose to do the same thing as we did before, which, let's say I'm going to take it from 85 all the way to the end here, and just set that at 100. and then do my, grab all the values from there down to 10 and horizontally interpolate again. This would be the same setup as we had before, but you have an option here, right? You may want to do something a little bit different. Again, what this table is doing is saying when I'm running E10 or below, don't use anything from the flex tables. If I'm running 85 or higher, use 100% of what I've got in the flex tables, and anywhere in between, do the averaging between the tables. Interpolate those values and give me what that should be. So you may choose to do something different with your timing. You may say, you know what, from 75 on up or from 65 on up, I'm going to run 100% of my flex tables, for timing only. Okay, so this just let you know you have some options here with that. That is how we set up the flex fuel tab for ignition. All right, now down to the last flex tab we have to work with, and this is your advanced boost and your flex advanced boost tab. All right, so in your advanced boost, if you're running the solenoid, and you've set up all your boost targets and everything, I would take all of these values from these 5 tables, copy them over to your flex boost table, and essentially you're probably not going to change anything there. Again, this is going to be up to you, specifically how you work with your boost solenoid that you've got in your car and what you want to set up. But once again, you've inherited a flex boost. I'm sorry, you have not inherited your flex boost settings from either fuel or the ignition tab. So this one you have to set up again on your own. If there's any changes that you want to make between, your flex boost table and your advanced boost table. If they're all exactly the same, you're not going to make any changes. You really don't have to do anything here. It's not gonna matter, right? But if you're going to make some changes between the two and you want to have the averaging, again, go through that same process. Just take it from whatever your highest level of ethanol you expect to use. Set that at 100, and then as we talked about before, do the horizontal interpolation from your highest level value all the way down to your lowest expected value, and go from there. Once again, you have the opportunity to do something different here if you'd like to. And again, this is going to come down to personal preference and what you prefer to do within your boost table. But that's it. That's how we set up those 5 flex fuel tables within AEM, so we're going to be able to use our flex fuel sensor to our advantage and ready to go. So next we're going to take a look and step inside the car and see how things are going to look when we fire things up. On second thought, as I've been going through this rather quickly, and obviously I'm not going through every option set, on all of these tabs. I'm going to leave that to you to do that research and to set things up specifically for your car. But one of the things we want to continue to look at is whenever you have a fail-safe option, you do want to set it. So on the Flex Boost tab, there is this Flex Boost fail-safe, and essentially what this is saying, once again, like we said before, if for some reason we lose the signal, what is the safest situation we want to run in our car, not knowing where we're at. So this essentially want to run the lowest amount of boost that you can, so that if things go a little bit haywire, and your car doesn't know what kind of ethanol you got in it, you can put things immediately at a safe level. And that's one of the great things about AEM is lots of opportunities to protect your engine from various scenarios, and it's great that they've included those similar things when it comes to the flex fuel tuning. Back inside the driver's seat, with our AEM software hooked up to the ECU, and the car in the key in the on position. Don't necessarily have the car started right now, but immediately you can tell a couple of things. One, you can see our flex fuel frequency at 60.25. As we talked about earlier, the flex fuel frequency runs from 50 to 150. So this 60.25, it basically equates to what we see below in the flex fuel content of 10%. So right now in this car, just have that pump 93, nothing else is in here, and it's exactly showing exactly what we expect it to be. So we'll be running, when we run this, although flex fuel is set up, there's not anything from a flex fuel table that's going to be utilized based on our flex fuel blend. We're going to be running essentially the same tables that we've already tuned. We'll take a trip down to the gas station, and we'll put some E85 in here, and we'll be able to see how our flex fuel content percentage changes, and we'll be able to go from there. Okay, so back from the gas station, only added just a couple gallons of E85 just to kind of demonstrate how the mix will be. So right now we can see between the E90, E10 that I had in there and the supposed E85 that we put in, now our flex fuel content is up to 27%. So really just a minor modification there. And as we look on the flex fuel blend table, now we can see that we're sitting right there at about 25% of the 27% of the flex fuel table. So the system is working as it's expected to be. One additional thing to note here, it's very important. So, you know, as I mentioned, I just threw in a couple gallons of E85 just to see, to show what it's like when we're somewhere between E10 and the full E85. But when you're in your tuning process, right, we talked about it earlier, where you've got your E10 pump 93 tune is already done, and now you're going to go and do your E85 tune. What you need to do for sure is to empty out your tank. You really don't want you don't want to try to tune it when you're somewhere less than your maximum level of ethanol that you're going to have. So you want to empty your tank out, fill it up with however many gallons you need of the E85. If you're going to be running E85 and you're still on the winter blend, see if you can get your hands on some E98 just to bump it up so that you see that your flex fuel blend is right there at the top of the table where you want to be. Do all your tuning there, and then thereafter you're free to go. You can do whatever you want. You can then run E85, you can run the pump 93, you can do anything in between, and your car will manage it accordingly. Okay, so now we've completed both the installation and the calibration parts of the video, so it's time to wrap things up. As I said at the beginning, the question to ask yourself is, do I need to do this? And if so, why? Primarily, in my opinion, there are two reasons to do this. Number one, E85 is not always E85. Depending on the season and where you live, it can range anywhere from E85 down to E50. Now, while the octane difference between E85 to E50 are along the lines of going from, say, about 109 octane down to about 100, at the end of the day, it's still pretty dang high octane, and it's going to do a great job at warding off detonation. However, the ethanol content can go down enough that you would want your fuel maps to accommodate and flow less fuel accordingly. So that's one good reason. If your area just does a winter blend of E70 and a summer of E85, I don't know if the flex fuel sensor and the associated settings in AEM is going to make much of a huge difference for you. You could simply get away with a very inexpensive ethanol test kit like this one from RacerX, and within about 5 minutes you'll know exactly how much ethanol content is coming from your local pump. If you want to blend between the flex fuel and the pump gas, you can also use a simple octane calculator like this one to give you a fair idea of what octane level is in your tank. Now, if you want to run premium pump gas at some times and E85 at others, then you need to do this. Though honestly, if you can run E85 and it's readily available to you, I don't see a reason not to run it all the time. Now, reason number two, where I do see this as critical, is if you have two different tunes or calibrations for your car. One that maximizes the car under 93 octane and another that takes advantage of E85. Instead of having two different calibration files you have to load up when you switch fuels, not to mention draining your tank of the old fuel, you can let the flex fuel sensor determine that ethanol percentage and use the sliding scale that you set up in AEM to interpolate between your pure pump gas tune and your E85 tune on the fly. When your tank registers completely at 10% ethanol gas, it will run according to that map. When it reaches your high end of E85, it will run under that map. And for any time where you have a mix of both fuels in your tank, it will determine just how much ethanol is in there and calculate the appropriate fuel, timing, etc. to use between the two maps. For those of you who know me, you know I do a lot of tuning for the Jester Chrome ECU. Unfortunately, in Chrome, we don't have the ability to do this flex fuel setting like we can in AEM. Greg worked on this a few years back from what I read, but last I saw, he didn't see the real-world success that he had hoped for. Now, the Evo cars, they do have flex fuel options in Chrome, but for the 3000 GT and the Stealth world, AEM has this baked in, so you're going to need to use this AEM Series 2 or the Infinity to make it happen. Okay, guys, that's it. That's going to do it. I appreciate you watching the video, and let me know any feedback in the comment section. Take care, everyone.